And we are back for the last segment of the 6th episode of The State of Things, here today with Andrew Moss. Now, Andrew, I feel like we've had some points of agreement thus far, but just to make sure, we're trying to reach out. If you have any places where you find yourself siding maybe more with folks on the left side of the aisle, could you please get into some of those?
Absolutely. So in terms of the LGBT rights, I'm probably in opposition to a lot of my fellow Republicans. I think in terms of my beliefs, if we're going to, we tell people that everyone is equal. You know, Republicans like to say that, but when it comes to the LGBT community, we're not very outreach. We don't extend that same kind of courtesy. So to me, you know, we had the recent HRO expansion. I was very in favor because I think,
which is the Human Rights Ordinance here in Jacksonville. Which could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the city currently had before the expansion had a HRO Human Rights Ordinance that protected people based off of, you know, the common things:
religion,
gender, race, and
national origin. Maybe.
It was very, you know, the stuff is just reinforced on the municipal level to make sure there's nothing happening in public accommodation spaces. And a lot of people the LGBT community wanted to expand it to include
sexual orientation.
And there was a big fight on it. Jacksonville, we actually started in 2011. There was some contention. There was downvoting. It's
amazing because it's one of those things where if you look at the actual impact of these ordinances, it's not like we're changing all these things. No. We're just acknowledging that the times have changed and we're acknowledging that this is a concern now.
Yes, and that these people exist and deserve the same protection. A lot of people are trying
to argue. It's a distinct community that we have to have concerns for.
Yeah, and there was a lot of argument on the anti-expansion that it was giving more rights to people when it was just basically all it was saying is that you get the same protection as you and I would get if we were discriminated for our religious beliefs somehow. And I was really for it. And I think of the Republican Party, we talk about the future of the Republican Party, we need to start including people who are in that community because I think...
Well, I think we've come a real long way since 2006 with the whole... I can't remember what we passed in 2006. It was the Defense of Marriage Act. Yeah, DOMA.
I remember when President Bush got reelected, he tried to say he had political capital to push for an amendment to ban same-sex marriage. And I think that just sends a really wrong message to people that Republicans don't care about them. And
I think the whole messaging on LBGTQ WTF barbecue, right? Sorry, I always, whenever they throw the acronyms around, I'm like, come on guys, just say whatever it is. But I think culturally, it's been a losing battle since the 90s. Since Will and Grace, it was done.
Yeah, I mean, and
it was just a matter of time.
And I think the Republicans, as Republicans, we need to realize, you know, that it's not a matter of them getting extra rights, it's a matter of just getting the same rights you and I have. I think
it's one of the for me it's almost that I care more about the institution of marriage than the fact that it's 2 men or 2 women. Like I care more that there are more 2-parent families for children and having those better outcomes for our nation's children than I care about the nature or character of those relationships between the parents.
I agree. We're talking about the last segment about how social institutions have been eroding, and that's unfortunately marriage has been one.
And that's something that's why one of the reasons I consider myself a conservative, maybe as opposed to a libertarian, because marriage and some of those cultural and social issues I do feel very strongly about, and have continued to feel more strongly about as I get older. But I feel like we are diverting maybe more onto the GOP side of arguments here. So let's get back into more areas of agreement with the left.
Really, that's kind of my big issue. I honestly, when it comes in abortion, I've changed my view on it in terms of I was very staunch pro-life, even when I was libertarian, you know, small L libertarian. I believe that there's no acceptance.
I love the whole like small L, small R conceit, small D.
Small L liberals, big D Democrat.
Yeah.
But I mean, I believe that abortion was wrong no matter what, and I really had a negative connotation to people who were. I thought really bad about these people who were. How could you believe that people are killing babies? You know. But now I see that yes, there's instances where people, you know, they were raped. I mean, that's something I couldn't imagine anyone I love going through, and I think it's becoming more empathetic, and I do see a need to not protect abortion, but to kind of not stigmatize it.
See, I think I've maybe gotten a little bit more conservative on the subject because I went from a place of it has nothing to do with me. Don't have kids. I'm a man. I'm just not going to think about it and be conservative for other reasons and just have this not be part of my thing. Yeah. To now I am not, there should be no abortions, but I'm also not, there should be all abortions. We're never going to agree on this, and I think for the sanity of the country, ultimately, we need to come to a conclusion between these two extremes to basically stop people from trying to rip each other's heads off over it.
I wish that Congress would get more involved in terms of just setting a policy standard instead of relying on courts to interpret different. And
and I think there's a greater discussion to be had about to what extent our legislative system has abdicated its responsibility to both the administrative state and the judicial system.
Yeah.
To what extent is SCOTUS what Congress used to be?
Well, it's unfortunate people care, but more when SCOTUS's term ends than when Congress is in session. But
because all they're going to do is name a post office. Yeah.
Exactly. Unfortunately, but yeah. So I mean, that's what I've really kind of seen my eyes open. But I mean, I've also done a really better job at actually having like liberal friends and actually hanging out with liberals. And
that's something I've kind of noted about you, and I think maybe one of the things when I first spoke to you at the Shot of Politics event that interested me in speaking to you more is that you did seem, because that's something I've always thought was very important for myself, is that I make sure to surround myself with well articulated liberal arguments, because that forces you to go through the gauntlet of sharpening the knife of your intellect.
It's a gut check feeling, especially because it's easy to sit at home and read, these conservative articles and read conservative literature, but
feel good about yourself.
But at the end of the day, what's the real application to it if you can't explain?
Well, if the whole goal of politics is coming to an agreement with people who disagree with you, then wrapping yourself in the warm blanket of stuff you already agree with isn't really getting you anywhere.
Yeah, it is not doing it. But that's why I think it's honestly my life has been enriched because of this, and I've honestly become a little more conservative, but honestly more grounded in my belief system in terms of how to actually apply it to daily life and not just Facebook and Twitter. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more that people can think about real world impacts as opposed to, oh wow, this just happened, so I can do blah 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 on Twitter and Facebook and make my one liberal friend angry. I think that's much more healthy. I think organic conversations like this. But for me, something that I've been coming to grips with recently, and I have to absolutely credit my producer with, is becoming more skeptical of money in politics and saying that it's almost in a nonpartisan sense. I think that the strictures around how much money you have to have, how connected you have to be to even run in the first place, maybe keeps the kind of people who would want running from running. Whereas maybe in a more egalitarian system, and I haven't thought about this enough to come up with something that would really work, but I think about it maybe something like the NCAA bracket, where it's like, okay, we have all these regions in the country, and you just have a big debate with anyone who wants to try, and it's like regionals, and if you debate well enough people vote for you, you make it to the next one, and you eventually get to the finals, and that's our president.
And I might sound like Mitt Romney here, but I think you should have the right to donate however much money you should, and there's
a part of me that agrees with that as well, but
to me, that's a limitation of people's right to express themselves. And money's an expression of, not because, for example, you buy at a certain place because you like that place, so you want to spend money there.
I think maybe there should be money in the ability to advertise issues. If you could advertise for issues without it tying to any candidates, I'm trying to think of a way in which you have both the system of, we've got regionals and people debating and running against each other and people voting for them to move up in the process, while at the same time still allow money in advertising for issues and maybe greater partisan concerns that aren't specifically tied to a candidate.
I think there needs to be more sunshine in terms of how these PACs operate, these political action committees. Because honestly, at the end of the day, a political action committee is formed. People in a campaign will be like, hey, you're going to go leave, they'll go run this PAC. We can't talk to you. In all honesty,
wink, wink, nod, nod. I used to be your comms director.
And then we're going to take all these B-roll that we took from. There's actually a funny video of the Ted Cruz B-roll when they did for all his political action committees. They got a bunch of B-roll film that they did before they formed it, and it's funny. You have to look it up on YouTube. You're gonna laugh. It's like an hour of just laughs. But anyways, no, just more. I think more sunshine. Let's be honest that there's people who want to give money and
I agree with you that if we could get to a place where there was perfect transparency and everyone could know the effects of this money, where it was coming from, I would have less of an issue with it. But to the extent that people in America are able to use their financial station as a way of increasing their representation in a way that diminishes the voice of the everyday American. And I know that's a very fine line to tread, to try and thread that needle, but I naturally want to side with you, but I also can't ignore the fact that there's an issue here, that maybe it's more transparency or sunlight, but something needs to be done.
I think there needs to be more sunshine in terms of how when candidates meet with certain people with money. I think we don't see a lot of sunshine in terms of...
Or like when candidates are meeting with the Attorney General Loretta Lynch on a tarmac and it's Bill Clinton.
Well, that was about the grandkids and the grandparents is what I was told.
It was about the wedding and the golf weekend.
You know, there was very important. There wasn't anything going on around that time. I don't really.
There wasn't a campaign. There wasn't an election. Nah.
But I think that's what we're getting to this point where it's like money's become this very evil thing to almost talk about it, almost possess, and instead of just acknowledging.
Well, I think it's also less powerful than people think, because if you look at the amount of money spent by Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and we can argue about how he got all the free media exposure, but he spent half as much as Hillary and won, and I think that for me was a big takeaway, is that maybe money's not worth as much as we once thought it was.
I think if we have a citizenship that's more politically engaged, I think that the effects of money in politics...
I think the effects of Trump getting elected has made people way more involved.
But I think that's what's going to... People that's worried about money in politics, well, at the end of the day, when people start researching issues and get more involved, you can throw millions of dollars of commercials at them, but if they're informed on a certain issue and believe a certain way, you're not going to sway them. And I think that people are trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem that needs surgery, in my opinion. In terms of
well, it's almost like we need a ground-up rethink of the whole system to deal with the modern realities that they couldn't have anticipated when they came up with the modern primary system.
Yeah, one night.
But I mean, I also want a gold-plated toilet, and we'll see how long it takes for that to happen.
Yeah, never know.
But since we're getting up against it here in our last segment, if you were to maybe distill one large bullet point that you wanted to convey to people in our audience out there who are maybe early in their life coming to their own ideas about their personal political philosophy, or thinking about law school, or just maybe if you had something you could tell yourself 5 or 10 years ago, what might that be?
Think about how your ideas will impact not just you but other people. I think we think these political ideas that we talked about a little bit earlier, how great it is to you it sounds, but you don't ever think through, well, what's actually the long-term implications of what I'm thinking or what I'm acting, how it's going to affect other people. And I think once you realize from that perspective on how that's going to maybe blossom in the long term, negative or positive aspects, I think that's when you start thinking, oh, okay, maybe this isn't exactly the right thing that I should be
thinking about. The negative impacts of the things you like makes you come to maybe a more nuanced understanding of the problem.
Exactly. And for example, it's like healthcare is once again another issue that we like to discuss. People,
we could do a whole separate
and people really want to push a single payer system, and I understand it's a very well-intentioned argument. They want people to get covered, but they also don't want to. I don't think it's intentional, but we never discussed that that wait times go up and that people might get affected in seeing a doctor. And that's what I'm thinking. I think when you go into
and I think there's a separate discussion to be had about health care and what our government owes to like a subsistence level of, okay, we understand that the ER is going to have to take care of people, and we can't. There is something that needs to be done as far as subsistence health care, but beyond that, we like having our other expensive private system that allows us the huge level of medical innovation and the unrivaled quality of private care that we offer.
It's a discussion of what are actually rights. Is the government should give you the right to healthcare, or is it the right for government not to interfere in your healthcare? And that's a whole
and negative versus positive rights and that whole discussion.
Absolutely.
But really, I would just like to thank you so much for joining me here today. And I can already tell that we'll be having you back.
Thank you.
But it has been a great pleasure, and I'm really glad we got to cover all the topics we did. I think maybe some food for thought for next time might be SCOTUS, because we didn't even really
touch SCOTUS,
which, given our both of our backgrounds, I definitely think there would be some fertile soil there for us to till.
Absolutely.
But thank you once again, and thank you all for joining us. This has been CK and Andrew, and this is The State of Things, our 6th episode. But like and subscribe below.